Acting under the authority of and in accordance with Section 1A, 2A of Executive Order 13224, as amended, I have determined that the persons known as Tren de Aragua, also known as Aragua Train, Mara Salvatrucha, also known as MS-13, Cartel de Sinaloa, also known as Sinaloa Cartel, Mexican Federation, Guadalajara Cartel, Cartel de Jalisco Nueva Generación, also known as New Generation Cartel of Jalisco, CJNG, Jalisco New Generation Cartel, Carteles Unidos, also known as United Cartels, Tepalcatepec Cartel, Cartel de Tepalcatepec, the Grandfather Cartel, Cartel del Abuelo, Cartel de los Reyes, Cartel del Noreste, also known as CDN, Northeast Cartel, Los Zetas, Cartel del Golfo, also known as CDG, Gulf Cartel, Ociel Cárdenas Guillen Organization, and La Nueva Familia Michoacana, also known as LNFM, are foreign persons that have committed or have attempted to commit, pose a significant risk of committing, or have participated in training to commit acts of terrorism that threaten the security of United States nationals or the national security, foreign policy, or economy of the United States. And that is the Department of State Public Notice 12671, to be issued on February 20th, 2025. I'm Joshua Trevino, and this is The Hard Country.
Welcome back, everyone, to The Hard Country. My name is Ariana Guajardo. We are at the Texas Public Policy Foundation's 2025 Texas Policy Summit. And because of that, we're not only joined by Joshua Trevino, which thank you so much for introducing the show.
My pleasure.
But also we have Melissa Ford back with us. Thank you so much for being here and coming back to see us, Melissa.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me back on, Josh and Ari.
It is so exciting.
Feels great.
Longtime Hard Country listeners know that Melissa was the indispensable element in the initial success of the show, to the point that random strangers were flagging you down on the street, saying that they love the podcast. Isn't that true?
Yep.
Yeah.
No one's done that in a while.
They don't do that in Bolivia.
No.
Well, I'm so glad that you're back to talk about it. Of course, we have the foreign terrorist designation that's happened. But also, I was reading this New York Times article that was titled, "The CIA Expands Secret Drone Flights Over Mexico." And Melissa, since we have you here with us, would you mind diving into that and tell us what's happening?
Yeah, for sure. That was a crazy story. Thank you, Josh, for sending it to me. But it was definitely like some breaking news. There was like a senior official from the CIA that came out and said that they have been conducting these surveillance flights over Mexico to crack down on like their labs, right?
Like the fentanyl labs, right?
Yeah, the fentanyl and like the just conducting the surveillance on cartels. But we were just talking about what's interesting about that is that we depend largely on Mexico for these operations. Like we're feeding them the information for it. And it's going to be interesting to see if they're going to be cooperative on it.
Mm-hmm. And so how does that work? So America's doing the surveillance, and then what happens? Josh, do you want to explain that?
Well, right. So the drones, as Melissa says, they're MQ-9 Reapers, right? So this is a very well-known drone platform that the United States has used around the world for surveillance and also lethal kinetic activity. That's not what they're being used for in Mexico, but apparently the operational intent, which has apparently been going on since under AMLO, believe it or not.
And this started under Biden, right? This is a program that...
yes, right. It did.
So it's a Biden-AMLO initiative.
It's a Biden-AMLO initiative. And as described in the New York Times, so, take it with the appropriate grain of salt on that, but as described in the New York Times, there's particular chemical signatures that a fentanyl lab will emit. The Reaper operating out of Creech in Nevada will overfly Mexican territory, identify the location of the lab, but then, and this would seem to be the weak link in the chain, they communicate the locations to their counterparts in Sedena and the Mexican Armed Forces, who are, to no small part, actually helping to operate the labs, in terms of their institutional partnership. So I think it's very questionable to what extent this is an efficacious program.
So then, Melissa, have we seen the Mexican government act on that information then? Or like, what are they doing with it when they have it?
Well, it's been interesting because they're not exactly, like we are feeding them the information, but they're not exactly jumping at the chance to shut any of these labs
I
down,
wonder
right?
why.
Which is not surprising at all. And that's something that we've been saying for so many years, and something that we've repeatedly said on this podcast, that it's actually surprising that people are still surprised when they don't cooperate.
Right.
Because they've been very slow to move on the information. They've been dragging their feet when it comes to us giving them this information. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, what we have to do, if it's going to be unilateral. I know we've been saying for a long time that if we want anything to happen on this front, we can't count on their cooperation. And it's been evident to see that they are not really, they're not really being very proactive when it comes to this.
I think if I could interject
Please, yeah.
briefly, it's worth highlighting something as people think through what this means. So let's assume the most charitable interpretation, which is that we're feeding this information. So the Reaper drone finds a fentanyl lab, we communicate the location, and let's say the Mexicans immediately shut it down, which, as Melissa said, doesn't actually happen, right? But
dream scenario.
Dream
Yeah.
scenario. So let's say that they did. The question that we'd have to ask ourselves is that enough? And a lot of our work for the past several years, for the past half decade, really, has been arguing that it's not enough, because it's one thing to shut down low-level operations, and there's unnumbered fentanyl labs in Mexico at this point, especially since the Chinese moved their precursor operations over into Mexico in the past 2-3
And
years.
which regions are these set up in?
Well, the ones that I'm familiar with are in Nuevo Leon,
Okay.
in particular, so up north. But they're not just there.
Okay.
But it's one thing to go over low-level operations. It's another to go after kingpins, which is necessary, and it's been a strategy forever. But what's never been done, and what needs to be done, is to go after the political leadership that partners with the cartels. Number one among whom is Andrés Manuel López Obrador himself. And we've talked about this on previous shows. We're time limited now, so I won't go into it. But it's worth noting that the Mexicans will agree to this, which essentially targets foot soldiers and small-time operations. But the real change is going to come when political leadership suffers the same level of scrutiny and consequence.
Do you think that it shows that it's, I guess, not as severe of an action taken by the U.S. because Mexico is being so cooperative with us? Like Melissa, is Mexico usually this cooperative with American initiatives?
They haven't been. And I think that's one thing that's been interesting to see is, like, Scheinbaum has been pretty much backed into a wall, right? And there's been a lot of responding with a lot of these principles, right? Like, you'll say something like, well, we're going to take actions against the illegal immigration crisis. And their response continues to be, well, Mexicans are good people. Mexicans are hardworking people, but they don't come to the table with any solutions. And that's something that we've also been seeing now. Like, we say that, we want Mexico's cooperation with the fentanyl problem. We want Mexico's cooperation with this. And they will come back with a lot of principles on the table, but they won't actually propose or act on anything concrete. And I think maybe it's a matter of time before the Trump administration gets really tired of it. It'll be interesting to see.
Do you agree with that? We'll see, like, if the Trump administration will ramp up, I guess, actions from the U.S.?
They've been saying all the right things.
Okay.
Ultimately, we'll have to see what it is that they agree to and what it is that they decide to do. But I don't have cause for complaint yet. When we do, viewers will know. But look, I mean, from the U.S. policy side, it's never been more favorable. So you have to give the Trump administration full credit for declaring foreign terror organization status for cartels,
Right.
for being very direct about the fact that there is a Mexican state cartel alliance, for talking about the need for consequences. Again, the question is, do you enter into a partnership with the Mexican regime? And there are legitimate ways to do that, especially if you've made that regime turn upon the specifically political superstructure that has protected the cartels literally for decades. If that happens, then so much the better. We haven't seen it happen yet, and I think you're entirely right, Ariana, that, or I'm sorry, so you said this, Melissa, I'm sorry, but that Claudia has kind of been backed into a corner at this point. Like, she's going to have to choose between the cartel affiliations of her own party, Morena, and her mentor, Andrés Manuel, versus the pressure the Americans are bringing to bear. So probably, maybe repeating some of what you said, but probably what they're going to try and do is they're going to feed the Americans something they're going to keep us happy, which is a time-tested tactic for them. They'll throw up one of the chapitos, or they'll throw up some low-level operative or fentanyl labs, although they haven't really done that yet with this operation. And we have to have the discipline and the strategic insight to know that that's not enough. We have to demand real change.
Yeah, but there has been a bit of a shift, I think, and from AMLO to Scheinbaum, because with AMLO there was all of these comments on whenever we threaten to do something about the cartel problem, straight up defending the cartels. Like there was no line. It was just like no black and white. It was just he threatened that he would use his armed forces to defend the cartels from the US. And with Scheinbaum, she's been treading the line a little bit more delicately. Like at the beginning, she, just like AMLO, talked about the sovereignty, like, you know, came to the table with nothing actually useful. She just continued to like, oh, our sovereignty, like we're our own country. Until she was, like we said, backed into that corner and she was forced to actually like give some solutions. And so like Josh said, like we will still have to see what happens, but I don't know. I'm curious to see what it's going to take for the U.S. to actually stand up to Mexico and say, okay, we're done trying to cooperate. What do you think it'll take for them to actually go after the political figures?
Man, that's a great question. You could imagine all sorts of trigger points, right? Like an American family being killed,
Right.
In Mexico, which has happened,
Yeah.
on more than one occasion. I don't know. I mean, there's all sorts of plausible precipitating events, but how that affects the calculus of the White House and the decision makers, and obviously, it's one of many foreign policy priorities, especially this week, right? And so, we don't know yet. But there's got to be a line somewhere, and you know, part of the virtue of deterrence is you have to communicate what that line is. So hopefully it has been communicated.
Well, then speaking about like future potential action, now that we have this precedent set up where like there have been drones in Mexico, and the New York Times did say that the CIA said that they're not going to be used for any type of lethal action. But because we have this like precedent again of drones in Mexico, do you think that that could foreshadow potential military action or like military tactics in dealing with the cartels?
It certainly could, and combine it with the signals intelligence. Flybys of Mexican territory, not overflights, but skirting up onto sovereign airspace that we've seen. It is obvious that there is at least an option being established for that.
Mm-hmm. And then one of the things that you guys have both continued to mention is that what needs to happen is not just like attacking like, you know, the lower level the like smaller chapitos, I guess, are involved in it, but some of the people at the top, what would that action look like for that to happen?
Oh, that's a great question. I think for political purposes, it's sufficient to reopen some investigations.
Okay.
And again, we've talked about this on the show before, but I guess it doesn't hurt to be a broken record where policy is concerned. You know, Andres Manuel, who is the godfather of it all, right, still around, still controlling the party, running the country to some extent, handpicked Scheinbaum. That's exactly right. Although he hasn't been seen for like a month now.
Yeah.
He's disappeared.
Do you miss him?
Kind of. Yeah, his mañaneros were more interesting, that's for sure.
He's a stabilizing force in your life.
He also has this Tabasqueño accent that's very easy for me to understand versus, Claudia mimics
although she
it,
tries.
So she does try. Yeah. So as a poor speaker of Spanish, I enjoyed it. But yeah, I've been told by a couple of people, there's a rumor that he's in Cuba. I have no idea if that's true. It could be scurrilous. But he did not attend his son's wedding a couple weeks back, and now he's
Is that the
disappeared.
son who's here in America?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
I think it's another, merit-earned scion of greatness. So
I might be confusing leaders for that, but yeah.
No. Well, anyway, but all of which say, to get back to your question, the investigation into AMLO for his longstanding ties to the Sinaloa cartel was shut down by the Obama administration. I think it is sufficient just to reopen the investigation and to let it be known that you are. You don't have to bring an indictment. You certainly, an extradition would never be honored anyway. The Mexicans just wouldn't do it. But the investigation itself would send a signal that nobody is immune. Right now, they feel immune. You've seen this firsthand. And to take that away, I think would be important.
Well, what do you mean whenever you say they feel immune? Like, Melissa, what have you seen in that regard?
Well, I think that their behavior over the last couple of years has really shown that they think that they can get away with so much because they have, and because there's that precedent in place that they can do and say things, and everybody, there's this mentality, right? Like everybody knows that Mexico's corrupt, but nobody has actually done anything on it, at least from the U.S. side. And with Andres Manuel, the last 4 years, the outrageous things that he has said and done, and like the shows of sympathy towards cartel leaders, as well as like all of the evidence that there is, and there's a lot, and we have fact sheets, of all of the things that he said about cartels, or all of the actions that he's taken, and no one bats an eye. And so I think that when you say enough of these things and there's not a reaction, they start to think that they're untouchable.
So if people want to have access to any of those fact sheets or getting more of our research, where can they go? Josh, where do you point people?
TexasPolicy.com, and we've got a robust search function on the website, so you can look up Mexico, look up cartels, look up
fact sheet.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we have our new, actually it was just updated last month, our Abrazos No Balazos paper. There's an update as of January 2025 on there. And that's one of the papers that we probably reference the most. So it is now updated. I think the last one was from like 2023. It was pretty old, but
So now
it still has all of the
update.
examples. Yeah,
Nice.
it's been updated.
A lot of
So
new stuff.
that's a great resource.
That's awesome. So it seems like we're at potentially a turning point with our relationship with Mexico, especially with the new administration. And it seems like only time will tell what happens next. But if you want to continue to see, get updates from us on what's happening, first go to TexasPolicy.com, subscribe to our YouTube channel. And as always, this has been The Hard Country. Thank you guys so much for joining.
Thanks, Ariana. Thanks, Melissa.
Thanks, Ariana. Thanks, Josh. It's great to be back.
I know, and hopefully we'll get to Melissa coming back more often.
Yes,
we can keep you as part of the
let's make
conversation
it happen.
and do a deeper dive in the future. So yeah, thank both of you guys, and this has been The Hard Country.